New Orleans in 1918 was a city teeming with life, music, and a vibrant cultural mix. The streets were alive with the sounds of jazz, the aroma of Creole cuisine wafted through the air, and the French Quarter buzzed with the energy of a city that never seemed to sleep. It was a place where cultures collided and blended, creating a unique tapestry of sights, sounds, and flavors. But beneath the surface, a darkness was brewing. The vibrant cityscape masked a growing sense of unease, a creeping dread that began to infiltrate the daily lives of its residents. The bustling streets and lively music could not drown out the whispers of fear that began to spread. The Great War raged across the ocean, casting a long shadow over the city. The impact of the war was felt deeply, as families worried about their loved ones fighting overseas, and the economy strained under the pressures of a global conflict. The war's reach extended even to the bustling port of New Orleans, where ships came and went carrying both hope and despair. Adding to the unease, a series of brutal murders began to plague the city's Italian community. These heinous acts were not just random violence. They seemed to be targeted, calculated, and filled with a malice that sent chills down the spines of the city's residents. The Italian community, already marginalized and struggling to find its place, now found itself at the epicenter of a terrifying mystery. Fear clung to the humid air, as thick and oppressive as the Spanish moss that draped the ancient oaks. The very atmosphere of the city seemed to change, becoming heavier, more stifling, as if the air itself was laden with the weight of the collective anxiety and dread. Whispers of a shadowy figure dubbed the Axeman spread like wildfire through the French Quarter and beyond. The Axeman was said to be a phantom, a ghostly presence that could slip through the night undetected, leaving only death and terror in his wake. His very name became synonymous with fear, and the stories of his deeds grew more terrifying with each retelling. No one was safe, it seemed, from this phantom who crept into homes in the dead of night. The Axeman's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He would break into homes, often through a window, and attack his victims with an axe, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. The randomness of his attacks meant that no one could predict where he would strike next. Families huddled together behind locked doors, their sleep haunted by nightmares of the Axeman's blade. Parents held their children close, trying to offer comfort and protection, but the fear was palpable, and the sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. The once safe sanctity of home had been shattered, replaced by a constant state of alertness and dread. The once joyous strains of jazz that spilled from the bars and dance halls seemed muted now, replaced by a palpable sense of dread. The music that had once been the heartbeat of the city now felt like a distant echo, overshadowed by the fear that gripped every corner of New Orleans. The dance halls, once filled with laughter and revelry, now stood eerily quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath. The city held its breath, waiting for the next horrific discovery. Each night brought with it the possibility of another attack, another family torn apart by the Axeman's violence. The streets, once filled with life and energy, now felt deserted and tense, as if the very soul of New Orleans was under siege. The newspapers, hungry for any scrap of information, fueled the public's terror with lurid headlines and sensationalized accounts of the Axeman's crimes. Every new edition brought fresh details, often exaggerated, that only served to heighten the sense of panic. The media's relentless coverage turned the Axeman into a larger-than-life figure, a boogeyman that haunted the collective consciousness of the city. Each day seemed to bring a fresh wave of panic as the killer remained elusive, his motives shrouded in mystery. The police were baffled, unable to find any clues that might lead to his capture. The lack of progress only deepened the sense of helplessness and fear, as the residents of New Orleans wondered if the nightmare would ever end. New Orleans, the city that prided itself on its joie de vivre, found itself held captive to an unspeakable fear. The festive decorations that once symbolized the city's spirit now seemed out of place, a stark contrast to the anxiety that permeated every aspect of life. The landmarks that had stood as beacons of culture and history now felt like silent witnesses to a city in the grip of terror, waiting for the dawn of a new day that might finally bring an end to the Axeman's reign of fear. The Axeman didn't just kill, he terrorized. His reign of terror was not just about the physical act of murder, but about the psychological torment he inflicted on an entire community. His modus operandi was chilling in its simplicity and brutality. The Axeman's methods were straightforward yet horrifyingly effective, leaving no room for his victims to escape or defend themselves. He would often target homes of Italian immigrants, often grocers or musicians. These were hard-working individuals who had come to America seeking a better life, only to find themselves in the crosshairs of a merciless killer. Under the cover of darkness, he would pry open a back door or window, slipping silently into his victims' homes. The night was his ally, providing the perfect shroud for his nefarious activities. Many were asleep and oblivious to the danger lurking in their midst. The Axeman's victims were often caught in their most vulnerable state, completely unaware of the horror about to befall them. His weapon of choice was a straight razor or an axe, tools readily available in most households, then making his choice all the more chilling. These everyday items, turned into instruments of death, added a layer of macabre normalcy to his crimes. The attacks were swift and savage, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable carnage. Bloodstains and broken furniture told the story of a violent struggle, a desperate fight for life that was ultimately lost. Skulls were caved in, bodies mutilated with a ferocity that defied explanation. The sheer brutality of the attacks left even the most seasoned detectives baffled and horrified. The Axeman didn't merely want to end lives, he seemed driven by a need to inflict terror and pain. His actions were not just about killing, but about instilling a deep, pervasive fear that gripped the entire city. The brutality of the attacks sent shockwaves through the city. New Orleans, a city already familiar with violence, found itself facing an unprecedented level of fear and uncertainty. People were accustomed to violence, but the Axeman's crimes were different. They were not random acts of violence, but calculated, deliberate invasions of personal space. They were personal, intimate invasions of the most sacred space, the home. The Axeman shattered the illusion of safety that people felt within their own walls. The fact that he often attacked couples in their beds added a sickening layer of depravity to his crimes. The bedroom, a place of rest and refuge, became a scene of unimaginable horror. He seemed to revel in the fear he instilled, toying with his victims and leaving a city paralyzed in his wake. The Axeman's legacy was not just the lives he took, but the lasting terror he left behind, a gruesome calling card that haunted New Orleans for years to come.